But to be able to feel that level of anxiety, the high heart rate, the sweating, all of the fears, and to be like, oh, this is just a panic attack.
Hmm.
This is a lot of anxiety. I'm okay, right? I can tolerate these feelings, these terrible, horrible, negative feelings that, for the most part, most people want to avoid feeling, right? Naturally.
Hello and welcome. We're so glad you're tuning into the Taking Good Care show. I'm Dr. Andrew Wong, based in Toronto, Canada.
And I'm Dr. David St. Arno, based in Edmonton, Canada. We're two practicing psychologists with over a decade of experience each, working in a variety of settings and supporting diverse populations.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. While we're both practicing psychologists, our podcast is intended purely for educational and entertainment purposes. It's not a substitute for professional mental health care or treatment. If you're in need of support, we strongly encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health professional in your area. Good morning, Dave.
How's the weather in Toronto?
It's gloomy, it's cool. Fall is here, and so is October baseball for listeners in North America. Coming from Toronto, the Toronto Blue Jays are right in the thick of it, loving the baseball, even though it's keeping me late up at night. It's been a lot of fun because we're finally winning.
And playing well as a team. Yeah, it's been fun to watch for sure.
A lot of fun. So if listeners can tell, we're both sports fans. And I don't know about you, Dave. For me, I like to use sports as analogies in my sessions for people who do gravitate towards sports and play sports. I think it's a real microcosm for what we go through in everyday life, whether it's problem solving, making adjustments, persisting, being determined, resilient, and so on.
Oh, for sure. And I think so many people have played sports or, can relate to those kinds of metaphors, right? So, yeah, it's just easy to relate and sometimes makes complex things kind of just really simple. And you're just like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. But
so what
got
are we're you're going where I'm going. Let's dive into our topic for today. We're going to be talking about acceptance and commitment therapy. And Andrew, I think off air, you had mentioned that you'd recently or have done some training in this area. I don't have any formal training in it, but I have been aware and learning about it basically since our PhD program. So
yeah.
Maybe you want to give the listeners a quick definition or description of this approach to therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we've mentioned this before in previous episodes, and we've brought it up, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT or ACT. I think for the rest of the podcast episode, we'll probably just call it ACT. But it's a form of therapy that helps people deal with difficult thoughts and feelings by changing their relationship with that thought and feeling, rather than trying to just get rid of it or to employ like a ton of control over those thoughts and feelings. The reason why I like ACT is because we learn to live with the difficult thought or feeling rather than thinking that we have to get rid of it and shove it under the rug and never see it again. Or this idea that we can cure it or fix it. Right. So it is that idea that, we can live with difficult situations. We can live with difficult thoughts. And it was a therapy modality that was created or thought up by Stephen Hayes and Russ Harris. I think of them as pioneers of ACT. And it incorporates various different other areas of therapy, including cognitive behavioral therapy, including mindfulness. And I just really love the way that it's quote unquote packaged in terms of helping people understand how to accept certain thoughts and situations that are out of their control, committing to actions to improve one's life, and really thinking about their own values and foundations and how they want to live in those values without having to completely overhaul their lives.
Yeah, and I think even just to back it up a little bit for the listeners, a lot of times in our podcast, we're talking about different approaches. We've mentioned different approaches here and there. A lot of the approaches help with, like Andrew was saying, difficult feelings, life challenges, but they're different ways to kind of tackle a lot of the same problems, a lot of the same challenges that people have. So we're going to describe this approach as one way to do that, but also knowing that there are many right ways, many evidence-based approaches that have been shown to help people with either feeling better or reducing negative symptoms like depression and anxiety. And actually, I think that's an important point for ACT is that it really doesn't focus on reducing negative symptoms. It's one of the approaches that moves kind of away from the diagnosing mental health
Mhm.
disorders, right? It wants to destigmatize and de-emphasize that medical model.
I was just going to say, I think in the past, when I've worked with clients, some of the most difficult initial phases of therapy is being able to get through the push and pull of those difficult thoughts like, I don't want them. I know they're bad for me, but I just can't get rid of them. And as a therapist, I think as any empathic therapist sitting there watching somebody struggle, it's like, yeah, I want to help you, right? I want to help you get rid of those thoughts. I want to help you not have those difficult emotions. And if we could just, snap our fingers and say, yeah, it's gone now, that would be great. But the struggle is real when it comes to not being able to shut off the brain. And that's why I love ACT is that we're not trying to get rid of things. We're learning to live with it. Right. And
Mhm.
again, when you propose that to some clients, it's like, what? Right? I thought I was coming here to get rid of it. Why do I want to live with it if it's already so difficult? But that's the change of thinking about these difficult life situations or these difficult thoughts is that if we drop the struggle and see that difficult situation or those difficult thoughts a different way, can we coexist? That's why I love using ACT, especially for chronic pain, as we had that episode before. And to your point, Dave, about depression and anxiety, it's going to be a part of us, right? Even if you look at the research, somebody who has gone through a major depressive episode, the chances of them having another major depressive episode, is very high, right? It's something like 70 to 80% that in the future you're going to have another major depressive episode.
Just like if you've had a panic attack, right?
Yep,
It increases the risk of further panic attacks, both those things, right?
exactly. So once that major depressive episode or that panic attack goes away, are we going to live in fear of the next one?
Hmm.
Or are we going to learn to work with that situation should it come up again?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So even just for the listeners, that part of the origin of this approach, and I'm not sure if it's still online, but Stephen Hayes actually had a TED talk about his own personal experience with using traditional cognitive behavioral therapy to treat his anxiety. And he was having like crippling panic attacks and he was in the profession of knowing a lot about psychology and how to help himself and he was really struggling. And the metaphor that he uses, especially with anxiety, is like quicksand and being
Mm.
caught in quicksand. And the more you struggle, the more you try to move, the more you fight it, the quicker you sink and the harder it is to get out of that. So, a lot of like, if you think about this approach about acceptance, like Andrew's talking about, it's like just stop fighting it, right? Accept that it's part of life and that it will actually pass on its own too, right? That we don't have to always try to get rid of it. And the other metaphor that I remember even from my training, it was those Chinese finger traps, if
Oh,
anyone's
yeah.
familiar with that, right? So you put your two like pointer fingers into it or whatever, and then the harder you pull to get your finger out of it, the tighter it gets. So the whole trick of it is
Mm.
is to actually kind of stop pulling so hard, maybe even move towards it so it loosens so you can get your finger out. But if you think about panic, right? What do? We might just rip that finger trap apart, right? Because we're just like, ah. So a lot of times when our anxiety comes up, when our stress goes up, we end up doing more of the same and even in more higher intensity. And that actually creates more suffering.
And I think that's why it's a little bit of a juxtaposition when we think about the whole acceptance piece. And I get this question all the time. Does that mean we're giving up? Right? If I accept that something is happening, or if I accept that, I don't know, my son or daughter treats me horribly, right? Does that mean I'm giving up on them? And I think there's a big difference between giving up and accepting, right? I think
Mhm.
accepting, I would like to think that instills more confidence that I'm in control of this, that I'm making a conscious decision to not necessarily allow your kids to be horrible towards you, but to say, you know what, this is my situation right now, and I can work through it. I've got the self-confidence, the self-esteem to work through this, and I can employ strategies that I'm learning to work through it. Whereas giving up is as the term implies, we're just gonna lay back and let anyone have our way with us, which acceptance is not that.
No, and I think even just making it more specific, it's acceptance of our current experience, right?
Yes.
So I've mentioned this in a previous podcast, but a lot of the struggles that we have, a lot of the mental health challenges, really are connected to avoidance. And so ACT talks about experiential avoidance, where we're trying to avoid the feelings that we're having, right? Or the experience that we're having. And ACT actually encourages us to sit with those feelings, to sit with
Yes.
those experiences. And to your point, to learn that we can actually cope with them, we can tolerate them. They don't mean, like, even a panic attack, by definition, we feel like we're going to die, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to feel that level of anxiety, the high heart rate, the sweating, all of the fears, and to be like, oh, this is just a panic attack.
Hmm.
This is a lot of anxiety. I'm okay, right? I can tolerate these feelings, these terrible, horrible, negative feelings that, for the most part, most people want to avoid feeling, right? Naturally.
Yeah. The one piece I really like what Russ Harris talks about is, making room for those unpleasant feelings. Right. So rather than
Yeah.
trying to shove it out of my life, trying to shove it out of my brain, I'm going to make room for it. I'm going to sit
Hmm.
with it and acknowledge and name it that this is anxiety, right? This
Hmm.
heart beating really fast, this hot feeling or this sweat that is, emanating from my forehead. This is anxiety. I'm
Yeah.
here. I'm experiencing it. I'm safe. I'm sitting on my couch. I'm okay.
Hmm. And in therapy, it's like, hey, I'm right with you. I'm right here. You know, tell me, tell me where you feel that. Tell me what that sensation is like in your body. Let me know. So they're connecting to the present moment with support,
Yes.
right? And so that
Yes.
can be, therapeutic in and of itself. Like, a lot of these negative feelings, most people don't ever want to be alone in them. It's a
Yeah.
terrible place to be. It feels really dangerous, scary, unsafe, lonely. So to be able to go to therapy and say, well, here's the place where I'm actually, supported and connected to someone, to just let myself feel some of these feelings and know that I'll be okay because my therapist thinks I'll be okay and they've done this before with other people, and so I can kind of trust that a little bit.
I think you bring up a really good point, Dave, is this idea of connection. And I always talk to people about the power of connection, whether it's in a therapy session, whether it's, with family and friends, but in a therapy session, like being able to connect with someone who understands what that feeling is and what you might be going through. There is a power of connection there to feel safe that, you trust this person to guide you through this difficult situation and that you will be able to be more comfortable with it in due time. I think one of the things though is that it takes practice, right?
Yeah.
I think many clients come and they think, one session, two sessions, and I'm gonna employ these skills and it's gonna be easier after that. It's not a quick fix, right? In order to make space for, let's say, anxiety or really low mood, it takes practice to feel comfortable in that place. but also knowing that that place is not going to last forever. Staying in that place does not last forever, right? It's for a moment in time.
Yeah, and I'm actually, as you're talking, I'm also just flipping through the book that I got a way long time ago, and it's called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life.
Yeah.
And I think it highlights, I can't remember the specific term, but a lot of this approach, a lot of the theory behind it comes from linguistics, and it has a heavy focus on language and how the words and the language we use affects our mental health, our suffering, or our healing. So there's a part of there's a 6 steps to this approach, and I hope we'll kind of cover them all, but we won't follow them in order or kind of line them out in like a lecture kind of approach. But so we've covered acceptance, and there's more we could probably keep going with on acceptance. But acceptance, just as itself is can be counterintuitive. It can be like, no, 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 I'm coming to you to get rid of something. I don't want to accept it, right? So what do you mean this therapy is like, I just feel my anxiety, not get rid of it. So that can be, hard to kind of understand initially if it's not explained well. But then from there, they call it cognitive diffusion.
Yeah.
I'll let you lead this one and then I'll kind of jump in here and there, but it sounds like a fancy, $250 word, but what does it actually mean?
Well, cognitive diffusion, I think just very simply put, it's learning to step back from our thoughts and just to see them as words or just events, that they're not our truths, they're not our commands, they're not things that we have to be in control of. So for example, you can say, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure instead of thinking that I am a failure. Right. So you look at events as a thought, as an external entity, rather than labeling yourself as being that. Right. So it's like I'm a loser versus I lost a game today.
Yeah. Or I'm having a thought that I'm a loser,
Yeah, exactly.
right? It actually creates a bit of distance from
Yeah.
that thought that feels true, right? And then it's like, well,
Yes.
then it's just a thought. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Maybe it's context dependent, right?
Yeah. And I really like how ACT frames this because you're not labeling yourself as that. You are not that description. It's an event that just happened, and we can get past that particular event. The other piece, too, is that one thing that Russ Harris talks about is, this idea of dropping the anchor, which I really like. And I use this particular strategy with my clients quite a bit. And it's this idea that, it's finding where our foundations are and where we feel most comfortable, that we're able to say, okay, I'm having a really rough period right now. I'm really having a rough day, but what can I anchor to? Where can I drop the anchor to say, okay, you know what? The storm is really rough, but this anchor is going to hold me in place and I can brave through the storm, right? The
Mhm.
storm will pass.
Yeah, I think that is, with mindfulness, with some of these other approaches, it's assuming that there is a steady flow, right? And that these things will come and go. And even some of the research around, I think it's about 90 seconds is what emotions, if you don't do anything with them, they
Hmm.
will change. They will.
Hmm.
So trusting that that's true, that we, you know, comparing this a bit to traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, where you would have maybe the same thought, like I am a loser, and it was connected to a certain feeling, and you would create a thought log or journal, and you would
Yeah.
start to track your automatic thoughts like that. And then you would challenge those thoughts, look
Yeah.
for evidence, to refute it, and then rewrite a more accurate or a more rational thought, working at the same automatic thoughts. And I think we could probably have an episode it's been in the back of my mind just on like self-talk and how much self-talk kind of affects our mental health and how we're feeling about ourselves and how we're even functioning, at work or at school or yeah. So looking at that self-talk, and I was just thinking of one like, I don't feel safe, right? Someone says this, I don't feel safe. And
Yeah.
then it's like, if we change that to, I'm having a thought that I'm not safe, or I'm not feeling, I have a feeling that I'm not safe. It just allows us to kind of go, oh, well, that's a feeling and that's a thought,
Hmm.
right? It does not necessarily mean that in this moment you are not safe,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Yep.
I think it just opens up the door to kind of go like, oh, what else is going on here? Right.
Yep.
And then my whole nervous system doesn't have to be on high alert and be hypervigilant, right?
That's what I really like about ACT. It's that distance. And it really goes after this particular ingrained thought that somebody might have when it comes to the way they see themselves.
Hmm.
That this doesn't necessarily describe who you are. It doesn't say that, you are a loser. No, that's not it.
Even if, for folks that are kind of resonating with this, like you could write a sticky note, you could have this on your phone. I am not my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
first part is to start to change some of that self-talk around like I'm having a thought that I'm a loser. And then the second part is I'm not my thoughts, right?
Yes. And I think that's the beauty of it is like I'm not my thought. Like that is not necessarily who I am. I'm more than that.
If you regularly have these thoughts, it's like, well, that's interesting, right?
Yep.
Your brain has, come up with this thought process, and it's also possibly changeable, right?
Yep.
It is
Yep.
not you, it's not your personality, it's not lifelong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the way our
Yeah.
brains kind of work.
Yep. And again, that goes back. I know we're sort of talking about cognitive diffusion and distancing those thoughts, but it also goes back to the acceptance piece. Like it's all interchangeable in the sense, not interchangeable, it's all related, right?
Hmm.
By being able to say that I'm not my thought, that's also a piece of acceptance, right? That there's again more to me than just my thought or
And
this
that I can
particular
have the
challenging thought.
and that I can have these thoughts, and then I can have other thoughts, right? Like that kind of flow again.
And there's a lot of different exercises that you can use for cognitive diffusion as well, right?
Hmm.
Being able to again step back, and part of that is dropping the anchor, as I mentioned. So knowing that this is just a moment in time, that if I can drop this anchor, and I've had people visualize in session, close your eyes and pretend you're on a boat, right? As long as you don't have a huge phobia of being in the water, but pretend that you are dropping an anchor on your boat, right? You see the rough skies coming and you see the waves picking up, and right now it's time to drop that anchor, right? So whatever that anchor is, it's hopefully able to help you feel comfortable, right? That anchor might you might even envision that anchor being your family, right? Or a really trustworthy friend. Who is that anchor going to be? And so that even when the waves come, right, the storm is now here. Your boat might be rocking back and forth, but yet you are confident that that anchor is going to keep you in place. And that storm may last for half an hour, 20 minutes, but you're confident that you will get through that 20 minutes or half an hour unscathed. And then eventually the storm will pass, the sun will come back up, and your boat will be steady again.
I love it. And I'll add to that metaphor because that brings up another metaphor through ACT. And this is in other approaches too. But like, you can't fight the waves, right? Try to stop the
That's exactly
waves
it.
in the
Yeah.
ocean. It's just like you're going to be exhausted. It's going to kill you. Like
Yeah.
you will not survive. So if you can learn to ride those waves,
Yeah.
right? When the waves come.
The other exercise that I love to do, Dave, I don't know if you've ever done this with clients, just in terms of in the moment, letting go of, again, a difficult situation or difficult thought that Russ Harris showed in his training is holding a piece of paper out in front of you and just holding it for even 30 seconds to a minute, grasping onto a piece of paper. And you can go 20 seconds and you can start asking people, hey, how does that feel right now? And they go, my arms, yeah, they're getting tired. It's like, okay, let's keep going, right? And then another 20 seconds passes. How does it feel now? Yeah, they're sore, right? And then you contrast that with, okay, now just gently place the piece of paper on your lap or onto the side of the couch. And now how do your arms feel? And it's contrasting that tense and relaxed. It's like, oh, it feels way better. It's like now that piece of paper though is still beside you or it's still on your lap, right? If you picture that piece of paper as the problem is still there, but you're able to just gently let it down without doing much more with it. It's gonna be there, but at
Hmm.
least you are now moving in the direction of dealing with the problem from a more relaxed state of mind.
Especially if that problem is just a negative feeling. It's just anxiety, right? The anxiety is still there, but we're not holding it. We're not, tensed around it. I love that. And so hopefully that can help kind of just clarify like you might have a real problem about something that you're problem solving, but the anxiety or the negative emotion that comes with that, you can have that with you in a different way. And there's a couple other examples that I don't use, but I thought were they just stand out and yeah, they're they're I actually probably would like to try this, but I don't think I'm that funny in therapy. So some of them are like actually saying those thoughts in like a cartoonish voice,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Or repeating the thoughts like a bunch of times in a row, like I'm a loser, I'm a loser, I'm a loser. And maybe at
Yes.
the beginning, it's like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. Like I'm telling myself I'm a loser. But going with it a bit longer, it's like, oh, this is actually kind of ridiculous, right? Like it
Yeah.
actually feels kind of silly. And so those
Yep.
same thoughts don't have the same reaction anymore. And then we got a bit of distance from those thoughts than we had before. They don't just feel absolutely true.
Exactly. This is why going back to a bit around that chronic pain, I think ACT is really helpful for it because pain never goes away. Chronic pain never goes away, but it's learning to live with it, right? If we envision that pain as that piece of paper that I talked about earlier, we can constantly fight that pain from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. We can be holding up that piece of paper and it can be so painful. But if for moments we can let that piece of paper just fall down, it's gonna be there, but just let it fall down, right? So that the individual experiencing chronic pain can have a bit of reprieve from it, that we don't always have to fight it.
Yeah, and that the fighting it actually creates more suffering, right? And
Yep.
we talked a bit about this before, but like, from an Eastern philosophy, that pain is inevitable. Like to live
Mhm.
is to experience pain, but a lot of our suffering is when we try to fight that pain.
Yeah.
Um,
So cognitive diffusion is a really important step in ACT, being able to distance ourselves from the thoughts, being able to understand that we can accept the situation, not necessarily always fight the situation, but we can coexist with it.
mhm.
I sometimes even ask clients, hey, pretend you're holding the hands of that thing that's giving you difficulty. And then at first I'll get some awkward facial expressions like what? Like what do you mean hold the hand? Or pretend you're embracing that thing that's giving you challenges, right?
Yeah.
But then when we think about it more and we talk through it, it's like, huh, it makes a little bit more sense. When I work with teenagers or even some pre-adolescents, I say, hey, do you have an annoying friend?
Hmm.
Do you have an annoying friend at school who you're sometimes friends with and sometimes you're not?
Hmm.
So think of this difficult situation as that annoying friend. Right? Hey, sometimes they're a lot of fun, right? They're not annoying all the time. And so sometimes
Hmm.
you're like, yeah, come play with me. But as the longer you play with them, yeah, sometimes they have some tendencies where you're like, okay, this is getting a bit annoying.
Hmm.
And then you can be like, okay, I can't play with you right now. I just need a bit of a break. But come back later, I'll play with you then.
Yeah, I think we could keep rolling with like metaphors and analogies. It
It's
actually another
fun.
one that from ACT, it's like unwanted house guests, right? So I
Yep.
know here in Canada we just had Thanksgiving and there's a lot of like family events and stuff like that. So this might resonate with some of you, but we can have people over for a bit of time that we didn't ask to come over, right? And so treating some of our negative emotions, some of our pain like unwanted guests, but how do we invite them in for a bit, learn to live with them, get along, right? Hopefully they leave after a while, but this is a different way to kind of have a relationship with some of these difficult parts of life.
Yeah, it's like everyone's extended family, right? Like you have to manage it, right? You can say, I'm not going to go to that family gathering, but that may not look so good on you. And so if we choose to go, how are we going to manage it? Like, are we going to stay away from certain people, right? And maybe huddle up with people who we're comfortable with. That's the other reason why I love ACT is that you can use all sorts of analogies and you can cater it to the person's interests. I think as a therapist, as long as you are sort of a little bit quick on your feet and you get to know your client well and you get to know what their interests are, you can use these analogies to your advantage.
So moving up to some of the other kind of steps or elements of ACT,
Yeah.
like what is it? Contact with the present moment,
So
self
so
as the
mindfulness.
context.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, I lump
So
these together,
yeah.
right? Like a lot
Okay.
of mindfulness,
Yep.
being the observer, like
Yep.
being the witness who is noticing the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, all of that, the connection to your five senses, connection to your body, but you're the observer.
And being the observer and also like you said, the mindfulness piece, being present. And again, these are some of the looks that I will get when I say, okay, being in the present moment. Right? It sounds very jargon-ish. What does it mean to be in the present moment? We had an episode on mindfulness, but again, just as a reminder, it's really engaging in the here and now, what's right in front of me, right? Individuals who experience anxiety or depression, we'll go with those two. There's a lot of thought about the past. What did I do wrong in the past? What went really poorly for me in the past and therefore will impact my future, right? So now we're not just thinking about the past, but we're also thinking about the future. What's going to go wrong in the future? What do I worry about? Are my kids going to be okay? My child is off to college and university. I haven't spoken to them in a week. Are they okay? And so now we can go down that rabbit hole and just think of like the worst things imaginable that's happening to the loved ones around us or work or whatever it may be. So it's catching ourselves when we are starting to think or get too involved again in our past or in our future rather than being in the present.
Again, because a lot of our suffering comes from getting caught in the past or overly focusing on the future, right? Anxiety and depression kind of live in those spaces. So, connecting with the present moment, using mindfulness to do that, that's one way to really connect with the present moment. And I think, again, a bit of a refresher from our mindfulness episode, but it's moment by moment awareness in a non judgmental way. And that's super important, right? We're going to notice things, but we're going to suspend our judgments like, that's bad, or I shouldn't be thinking this, or oh my God, that'll be terrible, or right. So just like, oh yeah, okay, I'm worried that tomorrow I have a doctor's appointment. I'm going to notice that thought, and then I'm going to see what comes next.
One exercise I love to do with clients is watching our thoughts.
Mm.
And so this one I often connect with just to start, like a breathing exercise of some sort, getting the person comfortable, acknowledging their breath, noticing their breathing. And then we start to use visual imagery. And I find the clients who do probably the best with this activity are those actually with a more vivid imagination. And so one exercise is watching your thoughts on a leaf floating down a stream. That's a pretty popular one. And I like this one because again, you're distancing yourself from your thought. You see, let's say the word of, let's say, I don't know, worry, right? WORRY. And you put that particular word on a leaf that's floating down a river or a stream, and you're just watching it. You're not doing anything with it. You're not judging it. You're not saying, oh, this is a horrible looking leaf. Hey, you're just watching the word float down on a leaf down the stream, and you watch it disappear into the distance. If another word comes along, you watch it again, and you just see it float away. So again, just like that piece of paper, you're not doing anything with it. You're just observing it and letting it go.
Yeah, we're essentially just watching our stream of consciousness, right? And the leaf on the river or the clouds in the sky. Those are two that people tend to kind of resonate with, and just spending 10, 15, 20 minutes a day getting to know our mind and
Yeah.
how the thoughts that get generated by our mind happen quite automatically, you know, and again, just kind of like getting familiar with it and accepting it and not having to change it
Yeah.
allows us a different relationship with our thoughts. So, with the visualizations, again, kind of different approaches to become mindful, just present moment. And that's really mindful of our thoughts.
And it just sort of breaks up any rumination as well. Breaks up any rumination. We catch ourselves. I think that's another big piece here is being able to catch ourselves when we are going down that rabbit hole. And this takes a little bit of mental fortitude to say, you know what, I'm not going to allow myself to go there. And I've got certain exercises to help me not go there. From time to time, I do see a client, and it's really hard for them to break out of that rumination phase. There's almost like this idea of the identity of like, this is who I am, and therefore I'm not going to break out of this cycle of rumination. So it does take a lot of effort to do it.
Well, and again, so much of our challenges are like trying to get rid of anxiety, and we have different strategies, different behaviors, and I think rumination is one of those things that actually, although it doesn't help, with the big problem or the thing that you're ruminating about, it actually might reduce your anxiety a bit because you feel like you're doing something about the thing that maybe you actually don't have much control over or you're kind of helpless about. So I know I'm getting a bit off track, but I think, just being curious for yourself out there in terms of how many things you do to reduce your anxiety, whether it's, double checking the door before you leave the house, or there's different things that all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's totally anxiety related, right? And again, we'll have a whole episode on anxiety, hopefully coming out sometime soon. But I think if we shift again, just conscious of time and wanting to make sure that we at least cover the main elements of this, then we're moving to like values and committed action. And I think this part of this approach is not covered in like traditional CBT.
Hmm.
It's definitely not in all approaches out there to mental health and really unique and I think super important that I've integrated this into so much of the work that I do, even if I'm not using like ACT as a therapeutic orientation for a specific client.
Yeah. And I want to really emphasize that values in ACT. It's not a goal. We're not setting goals here, but it's actually understanding where you are situated in your life. What are you hoping out of your direction? And what do you really value within your structure as a person?
Mhm.
What really matters to you?
Actually, as you were saying that, it just reminded me, just tying back into like acceptance and being able to sit with our uncomfortable feelings. I remember like Stephen Hayes talking, or maybe it was Russ Harris, but one of them talking about like the flip side of our distress is our values. So if we're feeling really lonely
Yep.
and it's bothering us, it's because we really value relationships
Yep.
and connection, right? So those things can like help us learn about those parts and explain why something might bother us so much.
So this idea, I'll throw out an example, and this is just even from a client the other day. I want to be a patient parent, right? That idea of patience, that's the value. It doesn't talk about how we're going to do that, but it's something that anchors, going back to that anchor, it anchors what we value as a person and as a caregiver. And then from there, then you can say, well, how am I going to do that? Maybe I'll count to 30 today when my son or daughter does something before reacting, right? That's the goal or the behavior driven by that value.
Yeah. And we all have values, whether we, you don't know them or have words for them or not, right? So this is something that you can talk to anyone about, right? And I think with clients, it's really kind of fun sometimes to be
Hmm.
like curious about, well, what really drives you? What's really important for you in life, right?
Yep.
In this limited time that we have on this earth. And sometimes people are like, I don't know. Like a lot of our behaviors, a lot of our goals, like you said, like our values are not our goals, but we can have a lot of goals that might even be like extrinsically, like people told us we should do this or that this is important, but that isn't always true for us. And so, really kind of untangling some of that in terms of what we're doing and what's really important to us, and there's tons of worksheets. So if you're interested, you can look this up online. You can go like values clarification worksheets or values exploration, and it'll give you like a list of values that you can start to go like maybe even prioritize, right? Top 10 values.
Yep. And I think values is important too because it just guides the way we go about a certain problem, right? It runs deeper than just, oh, this is the action I'm going to take to try and solve the problem. It's like if we can anchor ourselves to a value, what do you stand for, right? If you stand for kindness and compassion, the next thing you can do is think about how can I solve this particular issue with a sense of kindness and compassion.
We talk about chronic pain or like depression or anxiety. Sometimes those things are not going to go away, right?
Hmm.
So let's say you got to live your whole life with chronic pain. Let's say you were in a motor vehicle accident and you have burns on your body, right? And just part of your life now is living with pain from those burns on your skin. And okay, if we accept that that is part of your life, now how do you like how can we still live a valued life even though we're experiencing pain, right? That we don't have to wait until the pain's gone or we don't have to wait until the anxiety's gone to be able to live a meaningful life. That to
Yeah.
me is like super encouraging.
Well, again, that goes back to values, right? Like it goes back to values that, hey, I still want to be an active individual. It's like, okay, so now we've identified a value, and then from there you can process that value even longer in a therapy session, right? We don't go straight to, okay, how are we going to do that, right? What is the importance of being active? And how does it feel when you think about yourself being active again, right? So you process all of that first, and that can take even one whole session or a couple of sessions before going, okay, now that you're really committed to that value, how are we going to do it, right? And I think, Dave, that takes us to the next step of ACT.
Yeah, like committed action, right? So if this is a value for me, how do I commit every day to be actually doing something, some effective action that is aligned with my values, right? And so this is a way of, again, kind of taking like a personal inventory of like, oh, geez, I'm living my life like this. This is what my daily routine is. This is what my job might be, or these are the activities that I do in my day. And now I'm looking at my values and I'm going, geez, there's kind of a misalignment, right? I'm
Mhm.
spending a lot of time on this thing that I don't really value, and I'm not spending very much time on the things that I value. So how do I shift that a bit?
And if life has changed, right, whether it's because of mental health issues or brain injury or chronic pain, it's also knowing that there's flexibility in our committed action, right? So let's say maybe you've had a brain injury and you can no longer drive, but you still want to be able to go out and socialize with people and still take part in community events. Okay, just because we can't drive, do we get stuck on that? Right? Are there other methods in order to fulfill the value of
Hmm.
socializing, of being a part of the community? Right.
Hmm.
So this is where being able to commit to that action, being flexible with our actions, and focusing on what we can control in terms of our behaviors, not how we feel or think. That's always going to have a life of its own. I think that's what ACT is sort of saying is that the feelings and the thoughts, they're always going to be floating around in there. But in terms of your behavior, right? Is it calling a ride service? Is it asking a relative or a friend for a ride, right? If we really want to continue participating.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, kind of drawing some parallels with traditional CBT is that, one of the main approaches, and we'll talk about this later, but like for depression with CBT is behavioral activation, right? So
Hmm.
it's starting to do something even though you don't feel like doing it. And there's a lot of parallels with this, but really being clear about like what are you actually doing and how does that align with your values? And then finding, like you're saying, other ways to do things because if you have lost the ways that you were able to do them before, that, you got to acknowledge the grief and the loss that comes with that. And then, yeah,
So what I really like about what Stephen Hayes and Russ Harris talk about in terms of ACT is that all these stages that we've talked about today, we float amongst them, right? It's not a linear pattern that we follow, and all of a sudden we're going to be like perfect human beings. Look, I think along the course of a lifespan, we will have different thoughts and feelings that come up. We're going to have thoughts that we've never had before. We're going to have feelings that are more pronounced than what they've ever been in the past. And so sometimes we have to go back to acceptance and understand what's happening. Even though you might be at the committed stage for something else, you go back to the acceptance. And maybe you will have to go back to diffusion at some point or practice mindfulness a little bit more because it's been more difficult lately. So, all these different stages we may revisit, but we try our best.
try our best and have compassion, right? Like that's even as you're saying what you just said, like part of, and we've talked about this, but just that self-compassion, I think that comes with the acceptance piece, right? I think they go together. If we're going to
Hmm.
accept parts of ourselves and even the parts that we don't really like, that actually fosters self-compassion and understanding.
I just find it such a compassionate and empathic approach to therapy. If anyone ever YouTubes like just old school cognitive therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, back then it was they really tried to standardize it. And sometimes, even to this day, like I hear from clinicians that it might be a lot of worksheets or there's not real this real human connection sometimes if we just think, oh, giving some worksheets and working on our thoughts and thought journals, like that's all we have to do. This incorporates a lot more of that human element while using sort of foundations of CBT and mindfulness to make it, I think, more digestible. That's the word I like to use with ACT.
Well, yeah, if you think about mindfulness as like non-judgmental presence, a lot of the traditional CBT, like the rational emotive behavior, or what is it? R, anyways,
REBT, rational emotive
RE,
behavior therapy.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Even the word rational, right? Like, and trying to assess our thoughts of, is this a rational thought or an irrational thought? All of a sudden you can get a lot of judgment, a lot
Judgment,
of
yes.
yeah, and clients that are judging themselves and really hard on themselves and kind of going like I'm failing at this because I'm not able to stop myself from having these irrational thoughts and
Yeah.
I
Or
know
I'm
they're
such an irrational person,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm such an irrational person. Right there, you're enmeshed with that thought.
Hmm.
You're not distancing yourself whatsoever from that. And
Hmm.
and there's judgment right embedded in there.
Yeah. And see, that's why I'm a loser because I can't figure out this thing to make myself feel better. And you can see how that can be, and not saying that all like, CBT done well addresses this really well, but CBT done unwell or poorly basically gives some worksheets to tell people how to reduce their anxiety or depression and really clean up their thoughts. And so I'll even have clients sometimes be like, I cleaned up my thoughts. And I'm like, okay, how, like what was that process like? And how kind were you while you were cleaning up your thoughts, right? And if you're just bullying yourself, you might get to have less negative or irrational thoughts, but you might feel actually kind of crummy about yourself. So I think the process matters, right? Not
Oh,
just the
absolutely.
outcome.
Exactly. This is why, and I'm probably being a little bit facetious here, but if there are any physicians who are listening, and the next doctor's note that comes to my office that says, this person needs CBT, I really hope people understand, first of all, what CBT is. CBT does not equal therapy. But to Dave's point, CBT done well can be really helpful. It can work, but it also doesn't fit for everybody.
Mhm.
And I've explained this in a past episode, but it's not for everyone.
Well, and the research is clear is that it does help, and it really like has made a huge impact in terms of talk therapy and how, it evidence based and be able to show that talking about things can help improve the way you feel and some of these symptoms. So I absolutely not discrediting the positive. I've even had clients that, they'll do an online workshop on CBT and walk away going like, "Oh my goodness, I wish I would have known that
Hmm.
whenever I say I need to or I have to or like that I can change that to it would be nice if I could, or it would be nice if I did." Like just changing some of our language, changing some of our thoughts can really have profound impacts on our mental health and the way we approach life in general. So some really simple things can go a long way with CBT in terms of looking at our thoughts. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but I want to make one more comment about the values and committed action. One of the phrases that stuck with me is that like you don't have to feel motivated to do things that matter to you,
Hmm.
right? You don't have to feel good about doing it. You don't have to like wait until and I maybe said this already, but just so many people wait for their motivation to increase, right? And they might even
Yes.
be watching like motivational, things on the internet to like pump themselves up before going to the gym. And we actually don't need to do that. We could just go to the gym. And if it's aligned with our values, it will kind of take care of itself. We don't have to wait.
Yep. And that's the power of values, right? If we can clearly identify the value, this is then where we can come up with the committed action to say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym for 20 minutes today. So rather than saying, oh, I have to go for an hour, because that's what the research shows, you have to work out for an hour and that's where you're going to get the effects. No, throw that out the window, right? Stick to your value that perhaps you want to be a more active person. And so that's the starting point of being more active. And we just have to go and do it, right? Going back to your point about like the motivation piece, if we are committed to our values, we are already more likely to go do it than waiting for that motivation.
Yeah, I just had an analogy come up for me when you were talking about that. It's like, how about you take your annoying friend with you to the gym, right?
That's
That
right.
annoying friend that zaps your energy, that tells you that, this is a waste of time,
That's
that,
right.
yeah, just
Yeah.
take your annoying friend with you.
Show your annoying friend how cool it is to be at the gym. Right. And
Oh,
maybe your
geez.
annoying friend won't be so huge or so big anymore in your mind. Right. The more you get to that gym, they may shrink.
You know what I love? I've actually like anticipate at some point people are going to write some comments about this, and you could write your own analogies, right, as a comment,
That'd be
and
cool.
have some fun with this. Have some fun with your mental health.
Yep. Exactly. Dave, summary points or takeaway points. What you got for today?
Oh, I feel like I've repeated myself already so many times. As you know, the listeners can probably tell, like I might not use this approach from, start to finish, but it has integrated into,
Yes.
the way that I meet with people and talk with people. And, I might even just be listening and say, "Oh, that's really important to you. That seems like a strong value for you. Like fairness seems like a strong value for you."
Hmm.
And if someone goes, "Yes," and then I'm like, "Okay, how are you living that?" And so I mean, you could pick up the book, the one that I mentioned earlier about like get out of your mind and into your life. And actually, I think this book is really good for the overthinking people, the ruminators, the worriers that really get caught in their head a lot. But the book is quite, you know, heady and like a lot of jargon and a lot of like So hopefully you can just pick up bits and pieces that you liked from today and start applying it. Start
Yeah.
applying it to your life. And there are a lot of resources, and there's a lot more knowledge and publicly available stuff on ACT than there ever has been. I think 10 years ago there wasn't a
Yeah.
lot. And yeah.
It's really taken a life of its own in the last 10 years. And I think there's reason for that, right? Like it's utility is great. And I was gonna piggyback on your point about resources. Actually, this was told to me by an old supervisor who will be on in a couple of weeks, Dr. Martin Logan, neuropsychologist, and his whole thing is why read when there's YouTube? So he's like, get on a TED Talk, go watch a TED Talk, go find something on YouTube. And so with ACT, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube, both by Stephen Hayes and Russ Harris. If you're interested in this, take a look. TED Talks as well. So, if you don't want to read, that's okay. Nowadays there's YouTube, and get on there and find something for yourself. It's just a good resource, and there's a lot out there. For me, I think as I was thinking about, okay, what's my takeaway for today? I think with this whole podcast, it's been, educating people on different areas of psychology. And I think this is a really important one that we hit on today. We've introduced before emotion focused therapy, we've introduced mindfulness, and I think today was acceptance and commitment therapy, right? Here's another modality. If other modalities haven't helped in the past, maybe this might be helpful for you, right? So find a therapist, find a clinician who uses the ACT Foundation. And like Dave said, maybe not from beginning to end, but sprinkles of ACT here and there can still be very helpful too. So I hope we've done our job in terms of just again providing education around this.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. This was fun.
It was. It's gotten me alive on this very gloomy day. For the listeners, I was telling Dave beforehand with the time difference, I start the podcast here at 11 o'clock. And so there's a couple of hours before we get on air. But that means for me, it's dealing with other stuff beforehand, sometimes at work, admin stuff, client stuff. And, coming into the podcast, it's like, oh, okay, this is going to rejuvenate me. It's been a tough morning, but here we are. So this was good. Thank you for this, Dave.
Well, for the listeners, Andrew has been mentioning ACT like for months. We gotta do an episode on ACT. So I'm happy that we're getting there. And it also goes to show that we have a lot of things that we'd like to share with listeners that I think we'll be doing this for a while. So
Yeah.
this was fun to finally get to this topic.
Absolutely. So if you've enjoyed the episode and you're still continuing to enjoy the podcast, follow us, like, subscribe, leave us comments and questions as we monitor the podcast. We've noticed definitely more and more listeners are picking it up, which is amazing, and listeners around the world in all continents minus Antarctica. So it's been really cool to see where some of the listeners are from. So thank you.
Take care.
Take care, Dave.